My mother's FaceTime call came through at 3 o'clock in the morning, London time, the kind of hour when you don't answer unless something is wrong. Her name lit up my screen, and before I even touched it, I felt my stomach tighten. "Claire," she said the second I picked up, voice thin and shaky. "Honey, please, I need you to come home for Christmas." "I'm Claire Miller. I'm 30. I live in London now, in a small flat with a steady routine I worked hard to build." But when my mother says please like that, it still pulls me back into the old role. Be the good daughter, keep the peace, don't make trouble. "What happened?" I asked. "Are you okay?" "We're fine," she rushed. "It's not that, it's just, we need you here. Your father misses you. And the kids. Mia keeps asking when Aunt Claire is coming. Don't be alone over there on Christmas." She dabbed at her eyes, and I watched her carefully through a screen, thousands of miles away. I told myself she was just sentimental. I told myself it had been too long. I told myself that maybe this time, coming home would feel like coming home. So I booked the ticket. The trip itself was brutal. An overnight flight, layovers, the smell of airplane coffee clinging to my clothes. By the time I landed in San Diego, my eyes burned from lack of sleep and my shoulders ached from hauling my carry-on. I had a suitcase full of gifts for my brother's kids, wrapped in paper I'd bought near my flat, because I wanted to arrive with something more than excuses. San Diego greeted me with bright winter sun, the kind that makes you forget how tired you are for half a second. I tried to let that warmth reach somewhere inside me. They were waiting at arrivals, my mother with her hair done and her mouth already set in a smile, my father standing stiffly beside her, and my brother Jason behind them, juggling a stroller and a diaper bag the way young parents do when life never really stops. I expected my mother to hug me. Instead, she reached for my suitcase. "Give me that," she said, already turning. "Come on, we're late." "Late for what? I didn't know. I didn't ask." Jet lag makes you slow and old habits make you cooperative. I followed them to the car. At the house, Christmas was already in motion. The tree lights were on. The TV was loud. The air smelled like cinnamon. Jason's little girl, Mia, came running and wrapped her arms around my legs, shouting my name like I was a holiday miracle. The baby stared up at me with big, curious eyes. For a moment, my chest softened. I knelt down, kissed Mia's hair, and thought, maybe this is why I came. Then my mother clapped her hands once, sharp, brisk, businesslike. "Okay," she said, smiling too wide. "Claire, here's the plan. You'll babysit your brother's kids." I blinked. "I just got here." "And we are so grateful," she said quickly, sliding right past my words. "But your father and I, and Jason too, we're going on a family trip. Just a few days. We've been so stressed. We really need this." My father nodded as if it was already decided. Jason stared at the stroller like it might rescue him from the conversation. Mia tugged my sleeve, asking if we could play a game. "A family trip," I repeated, because my brain was still catching up. "Without me." My mother's smile flickered, then settled back into place. "Oh, Claire, don't do that. You live overseas. You're used to being on your own. The kids adore you. It'll be fun. Think of it as bonding." Bonding, like I'd crossed an ocean to be left behind. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even argue. I stood there in my coat, still holding a bag of gifts, and I felt something inside me click off like a switch. Quiet, cold, final. And then, as my mother kept talking, I noticed what was on the kitchen counter behind her. A glossy brochure with palm trees, a stack of printouts, and a credit card statement folded open like it had been placed there on purpose. My eyes locked on the numbers. I recognized my card. Not the full number, just the last 4 digits. You don't forget those. They're the digits attached to your rent, your groceries, your life, and there it was, printed at the top with charges listed beneath it. Airline tickets, a resort deposit, family package, kids club. They weren't only leaving me to babysit. They had put the trip on my card. My mother's voice went softer the way it always did when she wanted something to sound reasonable. "Honey, we didn't want to bother you. It just needed to be booked quickly. We knew you'd understand. We'll pay you back when things calm down. When things calm down. Another one of her favorite phrases, right up there with just this once. My father watched me now, wary. Jason finally looked up, and his face had that guilty, pinched look that told me he'd known. Maybe all of them had. In my head, I heard the words I'd been trained to say, "It's okay, don't worry, I'll handle it." But my mouth did something different. I took a slow breath. I looked at their expectant faces, the half-zipped coats, the hurry in my mother's eyes. Then I set my gifts on the floor beside my suitcase, and I said one sentence that made the room go silent. "Before anyone goes anywhere," I told them, "we need to talk about the money." The truth is, that sentence didn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't a sudden mood. It was the end of a long, slow lesson I'd been learning for years, the kind that creeps up on you one small favor at a time, until one day you look around and realize your kindness has been turned into a job. To understand why I stood there in my parents' kitchen, jet-lagged and holding my ground, you have to know what my family had been doing long before that Christmas. It started innocently enough. A few years ago, my father called me with that serious tone he uses when he wants to sound responsible. He told me the house needed repairs. Then it became the mortgage was a little tight this month. Then it became Jason had fallen behind on something. Each time it came wrapped in the same comforting ribbon, "Just this once." Just this once. Those 3 words can be a lullaby if you're the kind of daughter who was raised to believe love means sacrifice. I remember one of the first times I sent a bigger amount. My mother told me they'd found an amazing deal on a family weekend away. Something simple, something they deserved after all the stress. She said my father could never afford it unless I helped a little. I pictured them tired, worn down, needing some joy. I said yes, because I wanted them to be happy. And then, about a week later, my mother posted photos from a new brunch place downtown. Mimosas, fancy plates, bright smiles. It wasn't the brunch itself that bothered me. People can spend their money how they like. It was the feeling that I had been sold a story. I had been given the image of hardship, so I would open my wallet, and then I watched that hardship celebrate without a second thought for the person funding the relief. By then, I was already living in London, not in some glamorous movie version of London either. I lived in a tiny flat. I cooked most of my meals at home. I watched my spending carefully, because rent and bills in a big city don't leave you much room for mistakes. I built my life one careful choice at a time. When I bought myself a new coat or went out for dinner, I planned for it. I didn't treat myself on a whim, because I couldn't afford to. And yet, every few weeks, my family would call with another emergency that somehow needed my help more than my own future did. Sometimes it was my mother's voice, shaky with worry. Sometimes it was my father, stern and disappointed, like my saying no would be a moral failure. Sometimes it was Jason, quieter, less direct, but still expecting. He would mention the kids, how expensive everything was, how hard parenting had become. He'd sigh in a way that made you feel cruel if you didn't offer something. And every time I helped, I heard the same lines, like they were reading from a script they'd memorized. "Thank you, honey. We'll pay you back when things calm down. We just need a little breathing room." I told myself it was temporary. I told myself families help each other. I told myself I was lucky to be able to do something. But what no one tells you when you're the dependable one is this. People get used to you. They don't just appreciate your help, they build their lives around it. Your generosity becomes part of their budget, and your boundaries start to feel like betrayal. Over time, I began to notice patterns. The calls always came at the same kind of moments, right before a holiday, right after a big expense, right when a payment was due. The amounts were never small enough to be harmless, but never so large that I could easily say, "This is too much." It was always right at that uncomfortable middle point where you hesitate and then you give in. What changed wasn't that they became worse overnight. What changed was that I finally started paying attention with my eyes open. One night I was sitting on my bed in London, scrolling through my banking app, trying to make sense of why my savings weren't growing the way they should. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't careless. I was working hard. And still, every time I tried to get ahead, something pulled me back. I did what a lot of people do when they're tired and confused. I went through my history, not just the last month, not just the last few months. I went back year by year, line by line, transfer by transfer. I saw my own life, measured in numbers and dates. It wasn't one big payment that stunned me. It was the sheer frequency. The way just this once had happened again and again until it became a quiet tradition. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. An email from the bank. It had been buried under 100 other messages, shipping confirmations, work notifications, newsletters I never read. But the subject line stood out. Something about a mortgage update, and my name on it. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. Banks make mistakes. Emails get sent to the wrong person. It happens. I opened it anyway, and there it was, plain as day. Language that didn't belong to me, a mortgage account I'd never chosen, a property address I recognized all too well, my parents' home, and a phrase that made my heart pound in my ears. Co-borrower. I stared at that word until it blurred. Co-borrower. Not a helper, not a contributor, not a generous daughter sending money out of love. A co-borrower. That meant my name was tied to their debt. That meant their missed payments, if they missed them, could follow me. That meant my future, my credit, my ability to buy a home someday, could all be affected by choices I wasn't even present to make. I remember sitting very still, like if I moved I might shatter. I could hear London outside my window, cars in the distance, someone laughing down the street, life going on. And inside that small room, I felt like I'd discovered a trap under the floorboards of my own family. My mother called the next day like nothing had happened. She launched into her usual talk about the kids missing me, about how Mia keeps asking when Aunt Claire is coming. She spoke about Christmas like it was going to fix everything. She said, "Don't be alone over there, honey. Come home. We need you." And I realized, with a strange clarity, that "we need you" didn't mean they missed my voice. It didn't mean they wanted my presence. It meant they needed my money. So I booked the flight. But I also did something I'd never done before. I booked a call with a financial advisor. I gathered years of statements. I printed transfers. I pulled screenshots. I made a folder on my laptop and another one on paper, because I wanted proof I could hold in my hands. And I found a simple legal document template. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy, just a plain acknowledgement of money owed, because if my family was going to treat my help like a loan behind my back, then I was going to call it what it was to their faces. By the time I stepped into that doorway in San Diego with my suitcase full of gifts, I wasn't just the tired, jet-lagged daughter they were used to. I was finally willing to show them what it looks like when I stop playing along. When I said, "Before anyone goes anywhere, we need to talk about the money," the kitchen didn't just get quiet. It got still. My mother's smile held for a second too long, like a picture frozen on a screen. My father's jaw tightened. Jason shifted his weight and stared at the floor as if the tile could give him a way out. Behind me, Mia was humming to herself, unaware that the air had changed. The baby made a small sound in the stroller, and even that felt loud. "Claire," my mother said gently, "the way you speak to someone you think is being emotional." "Not today. It's Christmas." "That's exactly why today," I said. My voice surprised even me. It wasn't shaking. It wasn't loud. It was calm in a way that comes from being tired of repeating yourself. "You're leaving me here to watch the kids while you go on a trip you charged to my card. So yes, today." My father let out a slow breath through his nose. "We're not charging anything. We're borrowing. And we were going to tell you." "When?" I asked, looking straight at him. "Before you left the driveway? Or after you'd already checked into the resort?" Jason finally looked up. His eyes flicked to my mother, then to my father. "Claire, come on," he muttered, like I was the one ruining things. "It's just a few days." I nodded once, the way you do when you're letting someone finish talking before you show them the truth. "Okay," I said. "Then sit down, all of you." My mother blinked, offended. Excuse me? I'm not asking, I said, and I heard how firm it sounded. Sit down. There was a moment where I honestly wasn't sure they would. In our family, I had always been the one who softened first. I had always been the one who smoothed things over, apologized, paid, and moved on. Telling my parents what to do felt like stepping into a room I didn't belong in. But I stayed where I was, right by the counter. I reached over, picked up the folded credit card statement, and held it in my hand like evidence. My mother's eyes darted to it. My father's face darkened. Slowly, my mother sat at the kitchen table. My father followed stiffly, like sitting down was a humiliation. Jason hovered, then pulled out a chair with a scrape that made Mia look up. Are we in trouble? Mia asked, wide-eyed. No, sweetheart, I said immediately, softening just for her. You're not in trouble. Go play in the living room, okay? I'll come in a little bit. She hesitated, then padded off with the trusting innocence of a child who believes the adults will keep the world steady. The baby babbled again. Jason rocked the stroller with his foot. I took out my laptop, set it on the counter, and opened it with a quiet click. The screen lit up, and for a second I just stared at it, letting myself breathe. My hands were steady because I'd rehearsed this. Not with a speech, with the facts. My mother watched me, expression carefully controlled. Claire, she said, if this is about the trip, we can talk later. You're exhausted. You need rest. I looked at her and felt a strange grief, because part of me still wanted her to be the kind of mother who hugged first and asked questions later. But the other part of me, the part that had been doing the counting, was done with being soothed. It's not just the trip, I said. The trip is just the latest. My father leaned back in his chair. Are you accusing us of something? I'm not accusing, I replied. I'm showing. I turned the laptop so they could see. On the screen was a spreadsheet, plain, no fancy graphics, just rows and columns, dates and amounts, notes I'd typed beside each transfer so I wouldn't forget the reason they'd given me at the time. My mother's eyes narrowed. Jason's shoulders sank a little, like he already knew what was coming. I went through my bank records, I said. All of them. Not just this year. The last few years. My father scoffed. So you've been keeping score. I've been keeping track, I corrected. There's a difference. I scrolled slowly, letting the dates pass by like pages in a book none of them wanted to read. March, I said, tapping the screen. Mortgage shortfall. $450. My mother opened her mouth. I kept going. April. Jason needs help with daycare. $200. Jason looked away. May. Car repair. Urgent. $600. My father shifted, his hand tightening on the arm of the chair. June. Utilities. We're behind. $320. My mother's voice rose, sharp. We've had a hard time, Claire. You know that. I didn't argue with her about hardship. Life is hard. People struggle. What I argued with was the way they used hardship like a key to open my wallet while hiding the choices that made the lock necessary. I'm not denying life is expensive, I said. I'm saying I need you to see the full picture because you keep calling each one of these just this once, and it's not just once, it's constant. I scrolled again. The numbers kept coming like a tide. Here, I said, September, school clothes for the kids. Jason spoke up, defensive now. They needed clothes. They did, I said, and I helped. I'm not shaming you for needing help. I'm shaming you for pretending it's temporary when it's become your plan. My mother's cheeks flushed. That's not fair. What isn't fair, I said, keeping my voice even, is that I've been funding your emergencies while you plan vacations and put things on my credit card without asking me. My father's chair creaked as he leaned forward. We are your family. And I am your daughter, I said. Not your bank. The word hung there. Bank. It sounded harsh in the warm Christmas kitchen, with the tree lights blinking in the next room. But it was the truest thing I'd said all day. I clicked to another tab. This is the credit card activity, the resort deposit, the flight tickets, the kids club package. My mother threw up her hands. We were going to pay you back. When? I asked again because this mattered. After the trip? After the next emergency? After another, just this once? Jason's voice cracked with frustration. Claire, you live in London. You make good money. We're here trying to raise kids and dads. Don't, my father snapped, cutting him off, but it was too late. The truth was there. They saw my life as easier because it was far away. They saw my paycheck as extra because it wasn't tied to their household. They saw my independence as proof I didn't need what I earned. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them and pointed to the bottom of the spreadsheet. I added it up, I said quietly. My mother went still. My father stared at the screen as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into something less damning. Jason stopped rocking the stroller. Even the baby seemed to pause. I took a breath. In total, I said, over the last few years, I've sent you $63,000. No one spoke. The kitchen was silent in a way that felt almost holy, like the air itself was waiting for someone to tell the truth out loud. My mother's lips parted, but no sound came out. My father's face drained of color. Jason stared at the number as if it belonged to someone else, someone richer, someone not sitting in their kitchen on Christmas, and I realized something in that silence. They hadn't known. Not really. They'd known each payment, each little story, each just this once. But they hadn't known the total, because knowing the total would force them to see what they'd turned me into. I let the number sit between us like a weight. Then I said softly but clearly, "Now tell me again why you thought it was okay to book a vacation on my card." My mother was the first one to find her voice, and when she did, it wasn't an apology. It was a protest. "Claire, you're making it sound like we robbed you," she said, pressing a hand to her chest as if she were the wounded party. "We're your family. Families help each other." My father nodded once, hard. "Exactly. And you live comfortably. Don't act like you're struggling." That word, comfortably, landed like an insult. As if the life I'd built in London had floated down to me like a prize, instead of being earned in long work days, careful budgeting, and lonely nights. But I didn't argue about my lifestyle. I didn't bring up rent prices or taxes or the fact that a comfortable life still requires planning and discipline. I stayed with the point. Helping, I said, means you ask. Helping means you're honest. Helping does not mean you use my card without permission and then leave me behind like hired help. Jason rubbed his face with both hands. "We weren't trying to be—" he started. My father cut him off again, voice rising. "Don't weaken. Claire is overreacting. She always gets dramatic when money comes up." I stared at him. "I get dramatic when I'm being used." My mother's eyes flashed. "Used? After everything we've done for you?" There it was, the old familiar trap door. I'd heard it my whole life, in different forms. We raised you. We sacrificed. You owe us. It's amazing how quickly love can be turned into a bill when someone wants something from you. I took a slow breath. "You did raise me," I said, and my voice was steady. "And I'm grateful. But raising a child isn't a loan. It's a responsibility you chose. And I'm not going to spend the rest of my adult life paying interest on my own birth." My mother looked shocked, as if I'd slapped her. Jason looked like he wanted to disappear. My father's face hardened. "So now you're talking like a stranger. You're going to sit there and tell us what family is?" "Yes," I said, and there was no hesitation in me now. "I am, because I'm the only one here who seems to remember it." I turned the laptop back toward myself and clicked into a folder I'd prepared. This wasn't a speech I'd written on the plane. This was something I'd built in quiet moments, one document at a time, while my family assumed I would always fold. I pulled out a single page, clean, simple, printed. I laid it on the table, sliding it toward them. My mother's eyes dropped to it and narrowed. "What is that?" "A repayment acknowledgement," I said plainly. "It lists the total amount, the dates, and the fact that you've represented these transfers as temporary help and promised repayment. It doesn't have interest." It doesn't have penalties. It's not a lawsuit. It's just the truth in writing." My father stared at the paper like it was poison. "You want us to sign a contract with our own daughter?" "I want you to stop calling it help when you treat it like entitlement," I said. "If it's help, you ask and you respect no. If it's a loan, you acknowledge it and you pay it back. But you don't get to do both. Take my money as if it's owed and then shame me for wanting clarity." Jason leaned forward, eyes scanning the page. His mouth tightened. "Claire? This is humiliating." I looked at him and my heart did something complicated. Jason wasn't my parent. He was my brother. When we were kids, he used to sneak me extra cookies when Mom wasn't looking. He used to defend me when neighborhood boys were mean. Somewhere along the way, he'd learned a different set of rules. If you can get someone else to carry the weight, why would you stop them? "What's humiliating," I said softly, "is that you all thought you could send me a 3 a.m. guilt call, fly me home, hand me your children, and walk out the door on a vacation you charged to me." My mother's face turned red. "We didn't hand you children like baggage." "You did," I said, "and you wrapped it in Christmas lights to make it look like love." My father slapped the table with his palm. Not hard enough to break anything, but loud enough to make the baby whimper. "Enough," he snapped. "We are going on this trip. You can argue later." I watched him for a moment. That was the old version of this story, the one where my father decided and the rest of us adjusted, the one where I swallowed my feelings because conflict felt dangerous, the one where I told myself it wasn't worth it. But this time, I didn't adjust. I reached across the counter and picked up my phone. My mother's eyes followed it, suspicious. "What are you doing?" "I'm fixing the part of this you already decided for me," I said. I opened my email and tapped on the reservation confirmation. Resort booking, flights, family package. It was all there in bright, cheerful fonts like the world was celebrating their getaway. Jason's head lifted. "Claire, don't." My father's voice went low. "Put the phone down." I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, his authority felt smaller than my own boundaries. "You booked this on my card," I said. "That means it's my purchase." My mother stood abruptly, chair scraping. "Claire, stop acting like—" I held up a hand, not to silence her but to steady myself. "I'm not acting," I said. "I'm doing what any adult would do when they see unauthorized charges." Jason's face went pale. "You're not seriously going to cancel it?" I tapped the screen once, then again. My finger hovered over the cancel button like a hammer remembered it was made for impact. My mother's voice cracked, sharp with panic now. "Claire, please, don't do this. We need this trip." "You want it?" I corrected. "You want it? And you want me to pay for it." My father barked. "This is disgraceful." I finally looked away from my phone and met his eyes. "Disgraceful is using your daughter like a credit line and calling her selfish when she stops." Then I hit cancel. The confirmation screen appeared. A polite message. "Your reservation has been canceled. A refund will be processed to the original payment method." Jason made a sound like he'd been punched. My mother's mouth fell open. My father stood so fast his chair nearly tipped. "You—" my father began, but he couldn't even finish the sentence. I didn't stop there. I canceled the flights. I canceled the add-ons. Each tap was clean, final, undeniable. With every cancellation, it felt like another chain snapping quietly inside my chest. My mother's voice rose into something shrill. "You can't do this." "I already did," I said. Jason turned to my parents, frantic. "What are we supposed to do now? The kids, I repeated, and I felt something hot rise in me. The kids were always your shield. You can't hide behind them anymore. My father stepped closer, towering in the way he used to when I was young. "You listen to me," he said, finger pointing. "In this house, we do not treat family like criminals. We do not humiliate each other. You have no respect." I looked up at him, and I didn't shrink. I didn't soften. I didn't apologize. "In this house," I said quietly, "you've been treating me like I'm not family unless I'm useful." The room was chaos now. My mother crying, Jason swearing under his breath, my father pacing like a storm looking for somewhere to land. The baby started fussing, picking up the tension. From the living room, Mia called, "Mom, Dad, what's happening?" My mother wiped her face and tried to sound sweet as she called back, "Nothing, honey. Go play." Nothing. As if the truth wasn't tearing the room open. I stepped around the table and walked toward the living room, my voice softening again for the child who didn't deserve any of this. "Mia," I said gently, crouching, "come here, sweet girl." She came to me immediately, trusting. I brushed her hair back. "We're going to have a different kind of Christmas," I told her, "but it's going to be okay." Behind me, my father's voice cracked with rage. "You're ruining Christmas!" I stood up slowly, still facing Mia, and I answered without yelling, because yelling would have made me the villain in their story. "I'm not ruining Christmas," I said. "I'm refusing to be ruined." After the cancellations, the house didn't feel like Christmas anymore. The tree lights still blinked, the cinnamon smell still floated in the air, but the warmth was gone. It was like someone had opened a door and let the cold truth rush in. My father paced the kitchen in tight, angry circles. My mother stood at the sink, crying quietly, dabbing at her eyes with a dish towel as if she could wipe the whole moment away. Jason sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like it had betrayed him. I could have left then. I probably should have. But there was something I'd learned in all those years of just this once. If you stop at the first boundary, people will wait you out. They'll throw a tantrum, accuse you, guilt you, and then assume you'll come back around. They'll say, "Okay, fine," and then they'll try again next week with a different story. So I didn't stop. I opened my laptop again and pulled up the email that had started this whole shift inside me, the one with the mortgage account and my name on it. My hand didn't shake, but my heart was pounding, because I knew what came next would be worse than canceling a vacation. My father stopped pacing when he saw the screen. "What now?" he snapped. "Are you going to call the police on us?" "I'm going to ask a question," I said, keeping my tone flat. "And I want an honest answer." My mother's sobbing slowed. Jason lifted his head. The room watched me the way people watch someone walking toward a ledge. I turned the laptop so they could see. "Why?" I asked. "Is my name listed as a co-borrower on your mortgage?" The silence that followed wasn't confused silence. It was guilty silence. My mother's face went white. Jason looked like he might actually be sick. My father's eyes narrowed, but there was a flicker there, something like fear, quickly covered by anger. "What are you talking about?" my father said too quickly. "I got an email from the bank," I replied. "It lists me as a co-borrower. That's not a misunderstanding. That's paperwork. That's a signature. That's my credit." My mother whispered, "Oh, Claire." Jason's voice came out rough. "You weren't supposed to see that." There it was. Not a denial. Consider it a confession. My father's face hardened again, trying to force the old authority back into place. "It was necessary," he said. "We needed to refinance. Rates changed. Things were tight. We thought it would be temporary." Temporary. That word again like a lullaby they played to put my instincts to sleep. "You thought," I repeated slowly, "that it was acceptable to tie my name to your debt without telling me." My mother stepped forward, hands fluttering. "Honey, it wasn't like that. We weren't trying to trap you. Your father he didn't want you to worry. He thought you'd say no." I looked at her. "So, you hid it because you knew it was wrong." My father slammed his hand onto the counter. "Watch your tone." For the first time, I felt something steadier than anger. I felt clarity. And clarity doesn't bend. "I'm going to be very clear," I said. "Being a co-borrower means if you miss payments, it hurts me. It follows me. It could keep me from buying my own home someday. It could raise my interest rates. It could damage my future because you didn't want to feel uncomfortable asking me." Jason buried his face in his hands. "We didn't miss payments," he muttered. "Not yet," I said. and the fact that you haven't yet doesn't make it okay." My mother cried harder. "We were drowning," she pleaded. "We didn't know what else to do." I believed she felt overwhelmed. I believed she was scared. But I also knew something people don't like admitting. Being scared doesn't give you the right to harm someone else to save yourself. I clicked on my phone and opened the calendar reminder I'd set weeks earlier. The financial advisor call. I'd scheduled it for this day, this time, knowing that if I didn't put a professional voice in the room, my family would drag me back into feelings and guilt. I pressed dial. The phone rang on speaker. Jason's head snapped up. "Who are you calling?" "A financial advisor," I said simply. "Someone who can explain what you've done in plain language, because you're pretending it's small." My father scoffed. "We don't need a stranger in our business." "It's my business," I replied. "My name is on your mortgage." The call connected. A calm voice greeted us. "Hi, Claire, this is Michael. Are you ready?" "Yes," I said. "You're on speaker. My family is here." There was a pause, then, "Okay, what would you like me to clarify?" I didn't perform. I didn't dramatize. I just asked the most important questions. "Can you explain," I said, "what it means to be a co-borrower on someone else's mortgage?" The advisor's voice stayed steady, professional. "A co-borrower is legally responsible for the loan," he said. "That means the co-borrower's credit is tied to the mortgage. Any missed payments or defaults can impact the co-borrower's credit score and borrowing ability. It also means that in many cases, the co-borrower's income and debt ratios are affected when applying for other loans." My mother made a small, choking sound. Jason's face tightened. My father stared at the wall as if refusing to look at the consequences. "And what does it take to remove a co-borrower?" I asked. "In most cases," Michael said, "the primary borrower would need to refinance without the co-borrower, assuming they qualify on their own income and credit. If they cannot qualify, a sale of the property or another arrangement may be necessary. The key point is, removal isn't automatic. It's a legal financial process." My father snapped, "We can qualify." Michael didn't argue. He simply continued in the calm tone that professionals use when they've heard denial many times. "Qualification depends on income, existing debt, credit profile, and lender requirements. It would need to be evaluated." I felt my chest tighten, not from fear, but from the weight of how long they'd been comfortable risking me. I thanked Michael and ended the call. Then I turned back to my family. "This is what happens next," I said. My father barked a bitter laugh. "Oh, now you're giving orders." "I'm setting boundaries," I corrected, "and consequences." I opened a folder and pulled out another printed sheet, this one not about repayment but about immediate steps, cancellation confirmations, account numbers, and a list of recurring charges I had found connected to my card. There were subscriptions I didn't use. There were services I hadn't signed up for. There were auto payments attached to my name that had become invisible to them because they weren't paying. My mother's eyes widened. "What is all that?" "Everything I'm ending," I said. Jason sat up, alarmed. "You can't just—" "I can," I said, and I kept my voice gentle but firm, "because they're on my accounts." I went through them one by one. "I'm stopping the automatic payments," I said. "No more mortgage shortfalls covered by me. No more utilities paid through my card. No more streaming services, no more temporary help that becomes permanent." My mother cried, "But we need time." "You've had years," I said quietly. My father stepped closer again, voice low and threatening. "So you're going to punish us?" "No," I said. "I'm going to stop enabling you." Jason's eyes filled with panic. "Claire, the kids." "We'll be fine," I said, looking him in the eye, "because you will figure it out. Like every adult has to when there's no secret safety net." Then I opened my banking app and began canceling, removing, freezing, each action followed by a confirmation message. Cancel, confirm, done. The sound of email notifications hitting my inbox became a rhythm, ping, ping, like a clock counting down the end of an era. My mother's voice was raw now. "You're tearing the family apart." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw accusations back at her. I said the simplest truth I had. "I didn't tear it apart," I said. "I just stopped holding it together with my own body." There was a long moment where no one spoke. My father stared at me like he didn't recognize me. Jason looked like he'd aged 10 years in an hour. My mother sank into a chair, exhausted. And in that quiet, I realized something that made me almost sad. They weren't angry because I'd canceled a vacation. They were angry because I'd made them face reality, one confirmation email at a time. I left that house before sunset, not in a dramatic storm out, not with slamming doors or shouted last words. I simply packed my suitcase back up, zipped it, and carried it to the front door while the tree lights blinked behind me like nothing had happened. My mother followed me into the hallway, still crying, still trying to pull the conversation back into the old familiar shape, where I soothed her, promised to help, and pretended the hurt didn't matter. "Claire, please," she whispered, grabbing my sleeve. "You can't do this right now. It's Christmas." I looked at her hand on my arm, at the way she held me like I was a runaway child instead of a 30-year-old woman with a life of my own. For a second, my heart wanted to fold. There's a kind of guilt that comes pre-installed in some daughters. It's not logical. It's muscle memory. But then I thought of that mortgage email again. My name. Their debt. The quiet way they'd chosen their comfort over my future. "I'm not doing this to you," I said softly. "I'm doing this for me." My father stayed in the kitchen. He didn't come to the door. That was his pride, his punishment, refusing to acknowledge my exit as if my presence had never mattered unless it was useful. Jason appeared in the doorway at the last second, looking like a man who'd been hit by a wave and was still trying to stand. He didn't stop me. He didn't apologize. He just stared at the suitcase and said almost helplessly, "Where are you going?" I paused with my hand on the doorknob. "Somewhere I don't have to beg for respect," I said. My mother's voice rose, sharp with fear. "You don't have anywhere else to go." I turned and met her eyes. "Yes," I said. "I do." And then I stepped out into the evening air. The truth I hadn't told them, because I knew they would only use it as another argument, was that I'd prepared for this, not with revenge, with safety. A year earlier, I had bought a small condo in downtown San Diego. Nothing fancy, a simple place with clean lines, a sturdy lock, and a feeling of ownership I'd never had in my parents' home. I didn't tell them because I didn't want them to see it as proof that I had extra. I didn't want the address added to their mental map of resources they could tap. I kept it quiet. I paid for it carefully. And every time they called with a "just this once," I felt that condo in the back of my mind like a lighthouse, my exit. I drove there in a rental car, still in my travel clothes, still carrying jet lag like a heavy coat. When I walked inside, the place smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and stillness. The kind of stillness that isn't lonely, just unclaimed. I set my suitcase down and stood in the middle of the living room for a long time, listening. No voices, no demands. "No, Claire, can you just—" My hands started to tremble then, not because I was scared, but because the adrenaline was leaving. When you've been braced for years, you don't realize how tense you are until you finally stop holding your breath. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall and let the tears come, quiet and steady. Not just tears of anger, tears of grief. Because there's a kind of mourning that happens when you finally admit the people you love have been willing to hurt you. I slept that night like my body had been waiting for permission to rest. In the morning, sunlight filled the condo and the world looked almost ordinary. I made coffee. I ate toast. I tried to let my nervous system settle. Then my phone started vibrating. First my mother, calling and calling until it went to voicemail. Then texts. Then my father, which was rare. Then Jason. I didn't answer. I wasn't punishing them with silence. I was protecting myself from the old spiral, where they speak, I react, I cave, and the cycle continues. Instead, I opened my laptop and continued what I'd started. I called the credit card company and confirmed every cancellation. I changed passwords. I added extra verification steps. I contacted the bank for a full copy of any documents related to the mortgage refinance. I asked for timelines, signatures, and disclosures. I took notes like a woman preparing for a storm, not because she wants the storm, but because she refuses to drown. Later that afternoon, I called my financial advisor again and then a lawyer. Not because I wanted to sue my family, because I wanted to understand my options. People hear the word lawyer and think of courtroom drama. Sometimes a lawyer is simply a flashlight. You don't hire them to attack. You hire them to see clearly. Christmas passed quietly. I didn't go back to my parents' house. I didn't play the babysitter role. I didn't sit at their table pretending everything was fine. For the first time in years, I let myself be alone without feeling like it was a punishment. A week later, the next phase started. My cousin texted me a screenshot. It was a Facebook post from my father. He'd written about ungrateful children and how some people forget who raised them. He didn't use my name, but he didn't need to. The comments were full of well-meaning relatives and old family friends who knew exactly who he meant. Kids these days have no respect. You did your best, Frank, praying for your family. And then the one that made my throat tighten. Claire always seemed so sweet. I can't believe she'd do this. That's the thing about being the reliable one. People don't imagine you saying no, so when you finally do, they assume you must have become cruel. I stared at that post for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, wanting to defend myself, wanting to explain, wanting to lay out the numbers in the comments like receipts on a table. But I didn't, because public arguments don't heal anything. They just create new scars. Instead, I did something quieter and stronger. I documented. I saved the screenshots. I saved the messages. I kept a timeline. I asked my lawyer what could and couldn't be done if my father continued to smear me. I learned that the best defense isn't always a dramatic comeback. Sometimes it's steady proof and clean boundaries. Meanwhile, reality started doing what it always does when the hidden subsidy disappears. A few weeks after Christmas, my mother left a voicemail that sounded different, not tearful and accusing, tired. "Claire," she said, "the mortgage company called. They want to talk about the refinance paperwork." I didn't respond immediately. I forwarded it to my lawyer. I let the professionals do what they do best, translate emotion into action. There were letters, there were phone calls, there was a new seriousness in my family's voices, because for the first time, they weren't talking to me. They were talking to systems that don't respond to guilt. When my father called again, his tone had changed. He didn't yell, he didn't lecture. He sounded smaller. "You really did all this," he said, like he still couldn't believe I'd held the line. "Yes," I replied. "I did." He tried one last angle. "You know what people are saying about you." "I can live with that," I said. "I can't live with being responsible for your debts in secret." He hung up. Jason showed up at my condo in early February. He texted first, asking if we could talk. I didn't answer right away. Then he texted again, shorter. "Please." I agreed to meet him outside the building. Not because I was afraid of him, but because I needed space between us. Literal space, so I wouldn't slip back into the old dynamic of being cornered in a family room full of history. When he arrived, he looked worn down. His shoulders slumped. His eyes were rimmed with exhaustion. He didn't look like the man who'd been ready to board a vacation flight. He didn't sit at first. He just stood there with his hands in his pockets and said, "I didn't realize it was that much." I nodded. "You didn't want to." He swallowed and his voice cracked just slightly. "Dad says you're trying to ruin him." "I'm not," I said. "I'm trying to save myself." Jason's eyes filled and I saw something in him I hadn't seen in years. Shame without anger. Regret without performance. "I'm tired, Claire," he admitted. "I'm tired of juggling everything. I'm tired of pretending we're fine. And I'm tired of knowing we leaned on you like you were just there." That sentence landed differently than all the others, because it wasn't a demand. It was the closest thing to honesty I'd heard from him in a long time. I held my coffee cup steady and said, "Then stop leaning." He nodded slowly, like he was finally understanding that adulthood isn't something your sister funds for you. "I don't know how Dad is going to handle this," he whispered. I looked at him and felt a quiet, sad certainty. "He'll handle it the way he always does," I said. "He'll either change or he'll blame me forever, but I can't carry his pride and his debt at the same time." Jason stood there for a moment longer, then said, "I'm sorry." It wasn't a dramatic apology. It wasn't perfect, but it was real enough to make my throat tighten. I didn't hug him. Not yet. I wasn't ready to close the distance that quickly. Instead, I said, "If you mean it, then prove it with action." He nodded again, and for the first time, I believed he might actually try. As he walked away, I went back upstairs to my quiet condo and stood by the window. The city moved below, indifferent and steady. I realized something then, something I wish I'd understood earlier. The moment you stop being useful to people who benefit from your sacrifice, they will call you selfish. They will call you cruel. They will rewrite the story so they don't have to face their own choices. But the truth doesn't need their approval. The truth only needs you to hold it. By the time spring came, the shockwaves from that Christmas had turned into something more permanent: consequences. When you pull away a hidden support beam, the house doesn't always collapse in one loud moment. Sometimes it groans first. Sometimes it shifts slowly. Sometimes the people inside insist nothing is wrong while the cracks spread along the walls. My family tried every version of denial before they tried change. At first, my father acted like I didn't exist. He stopped calling. He told relatives I was too busy for family now. He posted vague quotes online about loyalty and respect, as if a Facebook proverb could rebuild what he'd broken with real choices. Then, when the silence didn't make me panic the way it used to, he switched tactics. He called one night and left a voicemail that sounded almost tender. "Claire," he said, "your mother hasn't been sleeping. This isn't worth it. We're family. Come home and let's talk." I listened to it twice. It would have worked on the old me. The old me would have run back just to prove I wasn't cruel. But I wasn't confused anymore. I understood the pattern: warmth when they need access, cold when they want punishment. So I didn't go. I kept everything in writing. I kept communication short. And I let the systems do their work. The bank didn't care that it was Christmas. It didn't care that my father felt humiliated. It didn't care about the stories they'd told me for years. It cared about numbers, signatures, liability. When my lawyer finally received the full packet of documents, the truth looked even uglier on paper than it had in my imagination. My name had been used to strengthen their refinance application. My signature had been handled. That was the phrase my mother used later, quietly, like she couldn't bear to say the word forged. Handled. It's a small word that hides a big betrayal. At the same time, with my automatic payments stopped and my card no longer quietly covering gaps, their lifestyle had to shrink to fit reality. It's amazing how quickly "we're drowning" becomes "we can manage" when there's no longer a soft place to land. Jason started selling things. At first it was small: electronics, tools, the extra stroller. Then it became bigger: a designer watch my father always wore with pride, a handbag my mother treated like a badge of status, the kind of purchases that never appeared in the emergency calls but always seemed to exist in their background. When I saw those items listed online, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt something closer to mourning, not for the objects, but for the illusions. For the story I'd told myself about who they were and what my help meant. One afternoon in May, my mother showed up at my condo. She didn't call first. She didn't text. She stood outside the building holding a small paper bag and a look on her face I hadn't seen before, one without performance. She looked older, not in a cosmetic way, in a way that suggested something had finally reached her that tears and guilt never could. When I opened the door, she didn't rush past me. She didn't start with a complaint. She just said quietly, "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked into my living room and looked around like she was seeing a part of my life she'd never bothered to imagine. The clean counter, the simple furniture, the framed photo on the shelf of me standing in London, smiling on a gray day, the calm. She sat down slowly and placed the paper bag on the coffee table. "I brought you something," she said. I didn't touch it. "What is it?" She reached into the bag and pulled out an envelope. Then she slid it toward me with both hands. "It's a check," she said. It's not everything, but it's something." I stared at the envelope. I didn't open it right away. I watched her face instead. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. She looked like someone who had cried enough to run out of tears. "Why now?" I asked. She swallowed. "Because we can't pretend anymore," she said. "And because I finally understand what you were trying to say." I stayed quiet. She took a shaky breath. "Your father is furious," she admitted. "He says you embarrassed him. He says you turned your back on us. He says—" She stopped herself, as if repeating his words out loud would make them worse. Then she said something that landed like a stone. "But Claire, he also didn't know how far we'd gone." I lifted my eyes. "He didn't know?" My mother's voice got smaller. "He knew we were asking you for help. He knew about the money you sent, but the refinancing, the paperwork, he didn't want details. He wanted the result." That sounded like my father. He didn't want to be the villain in his own story, so he avoided anything that forced him to look too closely. My mother's hands twisted in her lap. "I let it happen," she whispered. "I told myself it was protecting you from worry because if you knew you'd say no, and then we'd have to face everything." She looked up at me, eyes shining. "We used you," she said, finally using the word. "We used your love like a resource." The room stayed quiet, and in that quiet I felt the strange ache of vindication. Not joy, not triumph, just the heavy relief of hearing the truth spoken without disguise. I reached for the envelope and opened it. The amount wasn't huge. It wasn't an instant resolution, but it was real. It was movement in the right direction, and in families like mine, direction matters. I set the check down and met her eyes. "I appreciate this," I said, "but money isn't the only thing." She nodded quickly, as if she'd come prepared for that. "I know," she said. "I know. I'm not asking you to come back and pretend everything is fine. I'm not asking you to pay again. I'm asking if we can have something normal." "Normal?" I repeated. "Just dinner," she said, voice trembling. "Just a meal, no requests, no hints, just this once. Just your mother wanting to see her daughter." The truth was, I wanted that too. I wanted a version of my family that didn't come with hooks, but wanting it didn't make it safe, so I didn't give her a big emotional promise. I gave her boundaries. "We can try," I said carefully, "but here's what has to be true. You and Dad have to remove my name from that mortgage, legally, not with words. With documents. You have to stop using relatives to pressure me, and if you ask me for money again, the answer will be no." My mother's face crumpled, but she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." She paused, then asked, very softly, "Will you ever forgive us?" I thought about forgiveness the way older women in my life used to talk about it, like it was a duty, like it was something you owed people so they could feel comfortable again. But I wasn't a child anymore. "Forgiveness isn't the same as access," I said. "I can forgive you and still protect myself." My mother closed her eyes, and I saw how hard that truth was for her. Then she reached across the table and touched my hand. I let her, but I didn't lean into it. I stayed steady. When she left, she didn't ask for a hug. She didn't demand I call more. She simply said, "Thank you for letting me speak," and walked out. That night, I sat alone on my balcony with a mug of tea and watched the city lights. Somewhere across town, my father was still angry. Somewhere, Jason was still rebuilding. Somewhere, my mother was probably lying awake trying to accept the new shape of our family. And for the first time in a long time, I felt peaceful, not because everything was resolved, but because I was no longer abandoning myself to keep others comfortable. A few weeks later, my lawyer confirmed something important. The bank had been notified, and the process to remove my name had started. It wasn't instant. It required paperwork and qualification and a real reckoning with what my family could afford. But it was moving. Reality was moving. On Christmas Eve the following year, I made dinner in my condo. Nothing fancy, just food that smelled like home without the pain. I lit a candle. I played soft music. I watched the tree lights blink and felt my chest loosen. My phone buzzed once, a message from my mother. "Merry Christmas, Claire. I love you. No reply needed. Just wanted you to know." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed back, "Merry Christmas, Mom. I love you too." I didn't message my father. I wasn't ready. And maybe I never would be. Some people don't change. Some people would rather lose you than lose control. But here's what I learned, and it's something I want anyone watching to hear clearly, especially those of us who grew up believing love means giving until you're empty. People who truly love you will adjust when you set a boundary. They may be hurt, they may need time, but they will try. People who benefit from your bleeding will call you selfish the moment you stop. If you're the one who always pays, always fixes, always rescues, I want you to remember this. Saying no doesn't make you cruel. It makes you free. Thank you for spending this time with me and listening to my story. I wish you good health, peace in your home, and the kind of family love that doesn't come with conditions. If this story meant something to you, please subscribe and stay with us for more. And wherever you are tonight, I hope you choose yourself, gently and firmly, the way I finally learned to choose me.